The Freewing AL37 is your own commercial airliner in flying model form. It's not like you can ride it or anything, but it looks like the real thing from a distance, and that is super cool. To keep from saying AL37 over and over, I'm just gonna say 737 because that's what it is, a 737. I just don't feel like saying AL37 over and over, I'm sorry. The 737 is a monster of a jet. I'm 6 foot 4 inches and this thing is longer than I am tall. It's downright massive. It's not quite a beginner's jet, but it's not quite an expert jet either. It kind of falls somewhere in that dreaded middle. It's good at one thing, being a scale airliner. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's actually pretty good at a lot of things, but before we get into that, let's cover the flight characteristics because in 2 years, we've never actually made a proper review of it. It's kind of a pain in the butt to assemble, so let's be real here. Because it's so bulky and takes up so much space, even with a basic screw-together assembly, the unwieldy girth of this thing requires a bunch of effort to put together. And unless you drive a land tank or some kind of jacked-up brodozer, you probably won't be transporting it fully assembled. Our 737 is a custom paint job in the classic Delta widget livery. This is what I grew up seeing, and it's my favorite version of the Delta schemes, but that's the beauty of the 737. There are a ton of different versions that you can paint it up in. So let's talk about ground handling because you don't want to fly this jet off of narrow runways. Our runway is 17 feet wide. It's kind of difficult to turn around in that much space with such a big jet. The underslung motor nacelles also love to suck up grass. So if you're taxiing on freshly mown grass, don't do it. The ducted fans will get clogged up with debris and you'll have to clean them out before it'll be airworthy. You'll lose a ton of thrust, trust me on this. Smooth and steady throttle application is the key to successful takeoffs. Like most jets, throttling up too quickly will shift the weight to the nose and cause it to track weirdly on the takeoff roll. Worse yet, throttling up too fast also causes the underslung motors to force a tail strike. Otherwise, it's really well behaved, and anyone with some jet experience should have no issues here. But we need to talk about the right center of gravity as well, and to get the right CG, we found that the jet flew best with 35 grams of tail weight added to the rear of the jet, which gets the balance point about 20 millimeters behind the marks on a 5800 SMC battery. Since the tail is so long, you can get away with a little bit of weight to shift the CG back to where we need it. The center of gravity is super important on this jet, more so than others because you will literally run out of elevator flying on the stock center of gravity. On my maiden flight, I had the elevator pegged on landing and it was barely just enough to keep it from smashing into the ground. Of course, good technique helps here too, so we'll cover that in a second. But first, let it be known that the 737 takes poor landings pretty well, but you'll run the risk of scraping up the winglets if you don't come in straight and level. Power-on approaches are best. Fly on the back end of the throttle. 10 to 20% is enough to sustain a gentle approach and bring in the jet on the main wheels. It's super easy to wheelie too, which makes touch and goes a breeze. This is actually one of my favorite jets to fly touch and goes with because it's predictable and stable.
Alright, here you go. Free-fall landing. Oh, there you go. Oh, the touch and go. The touch and go. It's gonna go around.
So long as you're following my thrust advice on landing, again, just hold some pressure on the backside of the throttle while bringing it in. The low slung motors will keep it in the right attitude. Then all you have to do is give it a slight pull on the elevator to flare it on the mains, hold the elevator a little and it'll wheelie right down the runway. Throttle up and it rotates just like the real deal. Contrary to popular opinion, I'm gonna be that guy and just come out and say it. The 737 is not boring to fly, and in fact, it's actually really aerobatic if you want it to be. But one area that it really surprised me in is that it's actually capable of flying high alpha. My initial testing 2 years ago was kinda doo-doo, because I didn't know what I was doing. But seeing how the jet landed with thrust clued me in. You gotta use the low slung motors to your advantage because they produce an upward pitch response. So if you hold a little bit of elevator and pulse the throttle with full flaps, it'll fly a sustained high alpha. And if it, drops a wing, All you gotta do is immediately counter with rudder. It is stupid amounts of fun, and it's honestly stupid that it's even capable of it at all. But I bet the full-scale 737 could do this too if it had a bit more thrust to weight, and some pilots who were maybe willing to consider pushing the envelope with it. A common complaint also is that the rolls are kinda slow. So me being me, I found the rolls were best augmented with rudder for greater effect, or you can do what I did and follow the setup guide in the description and mix the flaps and elevators into the roll for Taylor flappervators, which increase the roll rate by at least 50%. The jet also performs knife edge passes, graceful rolls and loops, etc. All that airplane stuff that you would expect it to do because it's, you know, an airplane and all that. It's a ton of fun to fly and it doesn't feel underpowered in the slightest. For being such a big jet, it's ridiculously agile, again, assuming that you added some weight to the tail to get the center of gravity shifted back. It handles so gracefully in the sky that there's legitimately times where you're going to think that it's not a model aircraft, but rather a full-scale 737 getting into the pattern at your local airport. When you want to rip up the sky, it's also one of the most hilarious planes to do it with because nobody expects a 737 to fly like a fighter jet, but it'll roll and loop and power through the runway corridor with the best of them. And the landings are just picturesque every single time. Nothing looks better coming in on approach. The Freewing AL37 earns a 9.5 out of 10 from us, and the only improvements we want to see are thrust reverse capable ESCs out of the box. This is such a glaring oversight on Freewing's side. How can you release a scale airliner without thrust reverse? I'd also personally like to see functional spoilers as well, but I know that's probably got to be tempting the wing-loading devil a little bit. It's not a heavy plane, so let's consider adding a few more functional scale details to it for version 2. Because there's gotta be at least a second version in the works by this point, with how long this jet has been out. I love this jet so much, almost to a fault, because I never want to fly it, because I don't want to crash all the hard work I put into it. But nothing is permanent, so enjoy what you've got, while it lasts, because it's only foam. You can always build another one and make a different livery. Consider joining us on Discord and let us know what you think, and if we used one of your airliner photos in this video, let us know on Discord and we'll send you a free TwoBros RC sticker. See you guys next time.